This Thrive Loud episode is brought to you by Hinge Consulting. Success on Amazon hinges on well-executed strategies. Contact Hinge Consulting to learn about total Amazon channel management and to see if your business has what it takes to grow over 300% over the next 12 months. That's Hinge Consulting at hingeconsulting.co.
Have you been boring yourself with uninteresting podcasts made by monotone and overly serious people? Are you tired of hearing the same stuff every day on NPR? Then please consider helping us on our mission of making Thrive Loud the #1 business podcast. Because, well, let's be honest, we're #1.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, we bring you entrepreneur, intrapreneur, author and founder of Bowery 315, or 315 for that matter. His new best-selling book, This Might Get Me Fired, offers an insider perspective on how to thrive as an entrepreneur in a company that's more afraid of change than extinction. Thrive Loud listeners, originally from Queens, but now living in Brooklyn, Greg Larkin. Greg, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Great talking to you, Lou.
So, you know, it's really cool when Thrive Loud is all about connection and bringing people together. And one of the coolest people in my world is the wonderful Jenna Axelrod, who's been on this program and literally was screaming, saying, "You've got to get Greg Larkin on the show." So I followed her lead and I reached out to Greg, Thrive Out listeners, and he was such a busy guy and doing so many things that it took a long time until we finally got him on. But here he is, and we're very glad to have him. He has a great story, as you could tell by the title of this book, has an interesting perspective, and I think we're all going to really like it. So, Greg, I'm going to pass the baton over to you and let you tell a little bit about your journey to the Thrive Loud listeners so they can get a sense of who you are, and I'll jump in accordingly. Sound good?
Sounds great. You mean my journey other than being awesome friends with an awesome person called Jenna Axelrod?
Absolutely, without a doubt, which is which I guess it's all downhill on anything that isn't on that topic.
Yeah, apologies in advance for disappointing.
No worries. All right, man. So I know you've had some really good success as an entrepreneur, and I think that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah. So this journey began for me in 2005 when investment research startup called Innovest hired me to research banks. And I was not equipped to have that job, didn't have the expertise to do it. I did it anyway. And being a complete outsider in the world of finance, I predicted that the then booming housing market was going to collapse. At Innovest, I put forward the first public prediction of the 2008 financial crisis. So that was like the first product I ever built as an entrepreneur. Not
a bad start, not for the rest of the world, but not a bad start for you, I guess, in that sense.
Well, I guess the ironic thing is I learned from that first product that if you're going to build something that matters, you better be prepared for some incoming flack. Because every bank on Wall Street who was betting that the housing boom would just keep going was furious with me. And that was kind of my first induction, I suppose, into entrepreneurship when my founder, Matt Kiernan, was like, if any of them comes after you and they don't like your conclusions, but they can't discredit your facts, then we'll take out a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal publishing your report and their reaction. And so I learned it pretty early that being an entrepreneur means being prepared to fight for the products that you build, especially if they're swimming against the tide. We were acquired in 2009, largely on the back of that prediction, for $16 million. And I had to make the transition from entrepreneur in a startup to intrapreneur in a huge corporation. And that was one of the hardest transitions of my professional life. The fighting never stopped, but a lot of the great products kept going. And I went from there to working on the innovation team at Bloomberg. And since then, I quit Bloomberg in 2015 and have been working with Google, PwC, Viacom, Nestle, kind of across the Fortune 500 as a consultant, helping them build really entrepreneurial products and companies that are pretty big.
So let's dive into that. Building companies within companies is a challenge onto itself. Is it something that you truly enjoy? It's almost like trying to figure out how to do something a little bit against, like you said, against the tide in a place that's going in one direction, even based on the call that you make. Is that sort of where you fit in this lovely little world of ours? Right?
Yeah, definitely. For better and for worse. I've always said that opposition is validation. No product I've launched feels like it's working until it starts to piss people off. I
love that.
And,
keep going. Sorry.
Well, and people get pissed off, and different people get pissed off in a huge company than if you're in a startup. The incoming fire is coming from the inside, typically in a large company, rather than on the outside. And initially that used to scare the shit out of me, but over time, I started to realize like that's when the real change is happening. It's one thing to build something and you get some validation from the market, or you get some validation from user tests. And that's a huge milestone in its own right. But when the thing that's most gratifying to me is when you take an organization that has been on autopilot for a really long time, and initially people will really resist the change, but eventually that resistance is the first sign that something more substantial, more sustainable is going to start to evolve in an organization that's kind of been the same for a really long time.
So Greg, you and I have to start partnering together. So let's discuss. I walk into organizations. I'm also brought in to help people not only change, but help to grow. And they're trying to grow through the way they connect with. It could be the message that a company has and the way they're connecting to customers. It could be their sales teams. And you could not be more right that people tend to get very used to doing something one particular way. And what I love about you, you're literally the fire starter, because from one example of what you did in one world, but getting in and you don't feel the friction really until it starts to happen. And then people start to come around to it. So how do you like being in that position as an individual? Because by the way, when you do try and ruffle some feathers and you come in and you change things, the organization kind of looks at you a little differently. How does that feel to you personally?
Well, so no one's ever getting how you hear me right now is how I am with my clients. You know, they're hiring me to act as a mercenary. They're hiring me to take risks that they can't take as an insider. And I make no secret of that. Like for an innovative product to work, people that think they're doing it already but aren't, and actually run a real risk of having a really important profit engine be disrupted by new entrants and new technology. Let's be really honest. Like I'm not there to simply do the safe thing. I'm there to do the innovative thing. Right. And I think going into it with that contract, and being really explicit that innovation is on one hand solving an unmet need in the market in an innovative way, and on another hand, it's making your organization more afraid of extinction than change. And you don't get one without the other. You won't have a product that makes an impact if everyone who thinks they're doing it already is allowed to believe they're doing it right, when in fact you've built a solution that displaces them. And that's a really hard thing to reconcile for some of these organizations, but it doesn't make it any less true. And we also happen to live in a time, thankfully, or not, depends on which side of this coin you are, which is no one gives a shit if you become a senior vice president anymore.
Right.
You either built something that's relevant in the modern economy or you haven't. And the costs of not innovating have never been higher. The ease with which a new product can enter into an extremely well-established industry and utterly displace an extremely well-established company and product. We've never in human history been at a moment where that time has been shorter. So yeah, it might not sound good. It might not feel good to hear suddenly that your fiefdom might be dismantled for the company to survive. I'm just the messenger, you know, and at the end of the day, a lot of my work is empowering all of the entrepreneurs who on the outside of an organization would be a very serious threat to an entrenched fiefdom like that, and empowering them to work on the inside of the four walls of an organization. And I'm really explicit that that's why I'm there, is partially to build something that matters, but also to empower people who may not now have a voice.
Talk to me about what led you to actually writing down in words, "This might get me fired."
I'm sorry, I have like a sinister laugh when you ask that question.
we may have to play that sinister laugh at the very beginning of the opening.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy how it started. I was pretty senior in the innovation and new products team at Bloomberg, which on paper was my absolute dream job I could ever have in my life. And in actuality, I felt totally stagnant. I didn't feel like the world needed a single thing that I was building. And just to keep myself sane during that time, I started just journaling and writing notes to myself for Dear Greg, and dating them to February 1st, 2009, which is the date when we moved from my startup office at Innovest into the company that acquired us. And I just started writing these letters to my younger self about, there's a couple things you're going to need to know about how to keep the entrepreneurial flame inside of you alive in an organization that's not a startup. Here's what you need to know. And it was literally just a therapeutic mechanism for me to gain a little bit of perspective about what I was going through and just kind of convince myself that I was going to come out the other side and be okay and learn a valuable lesson about intrapreneurship versus entrepreneurship. Later on, like after I started Bowery 315 and after I started to do work with Google and Bloomberg and started to sort of build a community with other entrepreneurs like myself, I started to share these letters and they were like, man, you need to put that into a book because that's not what Clay Christensen is talking about in The Innovator's Dilemma. And that's not what they were talking about in The Lean Startup. As great as those books are, like this is some deep on the ground inside baseball about the actual, what it's like to be in the room and all the crazy shit happens. And that's kind of when the book started, when I started to see that it was having an impact on people's lives. And it was sort of giving advice that a lot of people really needed and had no place to turn for it.
So a lot of writers and thought leaders, Greg, come up with some kind of methodology that comes with it. In that there's like almost like a game plan.
Yeah, sure.
You know, do you have sort of like this might get me fired, almost like a steps 1, 2, and 3, or it's lots of different things that have happened within your experience from the seats that you've been in?
If I had to distill it into a playbook, I could, and I do in the book. But I'd say it's equal parts. There are a few principles you have to be ready to embrace. And there's a few tactical things that you have to be ready to execute on in a really short amount of time. The principles can really be summarized as follows. One, always understand the cost of not innovating. If you're going to innovate, solve a problem that the company needs to solve and can't solve with the existing tools that it has at its disposal. Second pillar is never pitch an idea, always present an outcome. I've never understood why companies that embrace innovation have idea parties. It's so easy for an executive in a Fortune 500 company to say no to an idea. They risk nothing by saying no to an idea. In fact, they might make themselves seem like this valiant defender of corporate values who has the prescient foresight to see into the future and avoid certain death. Ideas are stupid. And every entrepreneur needs to only pitch an outcome and say, guys, if the train is leaving the station, you can participate. This is an opportunity for you to participate. But I know that we can build this. I know that the market needs this. And I'll move on with my life and you move on with yours if it's not the right thing. And then I'd say finally is every organization I've known, being an entrepreneur can feel like the loneliest thing in the world. And then you leave the organization and eventually you realize that inside of your organization were 500 other entrepreneurs who all felt lonely, you know? Many of whom, when they do leave, go on to put your original organization out of business with a new and disruptive product or a new and disruptive startup. And so a huge part of what an entrepreneur has to do is to kind of activate the entrepreneur underground. And that means both the senior leadership team of people who are executives that are just really want their legacy to be one of creating an innovation inflection point. But it also means activating this sort of secret dormant society of entrepreneurs that are typically quite invisible to the naked eye, but kind of making it safe for them to reveal themselves and work together and join together. And then I'd say the other big part of the playbook is if you can't launch a product in 8 weeks, you never will. And that's the antibodies within an organization that stifle great innovation and stifle great innovators. 8 weeks is all they need for them to kill the whole thing. You know, I always say that there's this conversation that happens when someone launches a product and like, hey, we like 3x'd our, you know, downloads in 2 weeks and we're crushing it. And we just closed a huge sale. And they send an email out to all of the higher ups in the organization to celebrate it. What the next email that happens is from someone else who thinks that you're going to threaten their territory, asking the CEO to go out for a golf game. And like on the fifth hole of that golf game, it's going to be like, hey, you know, I was thinking about all these regulatory issues or all of these compliance issues or the way in which our stack is unstable. That product that I heard about that Larkin kid is building, I'm a little worried. Are you worried? I'm worried. And, you know, and then you go and you have your meeting with the CEO and that seed of doubt has already been planted. So my point is it'll take them 8 weeks to catch on. Don't let it get to that point. You have to get to a place where you have a massive amount of both stakeholder validation and user validation by the time you get to that week 8, so that when that golf game happens, the CEO is really fired up and excited about what you built.
So, Greg, this is interesting. By the way, phenomenal breakdown of the playbook here, and I love the thought process specifically about the outcomes, because that is so essential as it relates to it. Not ideas. We throw these idea parties. I'm laughing because I think one time I saw an email that said that, and I go, "Whoa, that's a great idea." I have a better idea. I'm not going to go.
You should just put
so here's. Right, exactly. So here's the question, though. Some of the companies that you've actually come in and helped are that you've listed. Specifically, I'll use Google as an example. Sure. Happens to be one of the more innovative companies out there, and it's probably in their DNA to constantly be innovating. So is that type of organization, and I don't necessarily see whether it's Eric Schmidt or any of the founders going to play golf more so than you know, maybe a little different over at Bloomberg. So is there a different type of makeup of the type of company you end up getting inside and trying to figure out that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah. So to be specific, when I was working with Google, it was part of a joint venture between Google and PwC. And so you have one half of that equation, which is a 179-year-old accounting firm. And then you have the other half, which is Google. So my role wasn't to teach Google innovation. My role was to teach Google how to catalyze innovation in an extremely risk-averse, cautious industry with an extremely risk-averse, cautious counterpart to what could be and wound up becoming a really promising joint venture. And I think that really embodies the kind of organizations I do work with, in that, I think there's a tendency when we talk about innovation and entrepreneurs to neglect analog. In other words, if it's like not a self-driving blockchain virtual reality car, somehow it's not innovative. And in reality, in places like insurance or some of the greatest innovation I ever did was for a concrete company, and it was building technology so that drivers and dispatchers and the trucks all could keep communicating with one another. And I think it's the less sexy corners of innovation that you can really experience just this unbelievable acceleration that's just not possible where everyone else is trying to design the right technological breakthrough to solve the exact same problem. And I think coming to innovation from finance, and especially not in Silicon Valley, but from New York, you see a lot of unmet needs in business that in a lot of industries that are pretty antiquated or haven't really been touched by technology and haven't been touched by innovation for a really long time. And you can have them all to yourself. You can be like Scrooge in his money pit if you're a good entrepreneur who's able to build the right relationships and build the right coalition of entrepreneurs with the right technology. It's beyond thrilling, because you're taking industries where, like in New York, you have like truck drivers where people still call you yous, and and that's the second person plural. And you're like introducing artificial intelligence and machine learning there. That's the best. It's the best.
So we're here with Greg Larkin, who's innovating nonstop here. I want to ask the question that I ask just about every Thrive Loud guest, and that is, someone as innovative as you and always thinking about how to be a little different. We all have our off days. When you're having trouble thriving, who do you turn to, or what do you turn to get back on the thriving track?
Great question. I think the thing that I do is I go for a big hike. I shut down all technology. I drive 2 hours outside of New York City. I'll drive up to the Catskills and I will go hiking for 12 miles. And
nice.
Being in nature where there's literally no trace that humanity has ever inhabited planet Earth. And if you go to the right cliff, you can kind of see the New York City skyline off in the horizon. Yeah. And it really is good to feel small. And I'll tell you why. When you innovate well, if you do it right, you're solving a very human problem. You're making people better able to connect with one another, communicate with one another, help one another. You're being of service. And you can lose that kind of perspective when you're in the middle of a product sprint and the user doesn't know what button to press and bugs keep popping up and things keep breaking. And there's some CEO that's like taking screenshots to show evidence that you should have your innovation lab shut down. And if you go for a hike and you just breathe a little bit, it's just like, you know what? We're supposed to be here. We're going to be just fine. Even if this product doesn't work, that doesn't mean I'm wrong or it's wrong. It just means it didn't work. And, I know there's like a tendency in innovation circles to sort of fetishize failure. Failure sucks. It sucks. When someone depends on you to solve a really important problem, and if you get it wrong, people might lose their jobs, or your reputation might be tarnished. I'm sorry, that just sucks. Like, it's not a good feeling, and you get over it. And, the good news is you fail fast, and the bad news is you fail often. I think it's important, though, when you can remove yourself from that environment and gain perspective and get some analog perspective around, like, why are people here on Earth, and where does your job as an innovator and entrepreneur fit in the context of that?
Love it. And couldn't agree more with you on both fronts. There's a peak. I live in northern Westchester, so I'm not too far from New York City. And every now and then you can go to a hill and you could look through the haze.
Yeah.
You could see New York City. But that view from where you're talking about further north or anywhere, for those that, you know, are out west and can stand on, you know, Grand Canyon, I love that expression. Gives you a chance to feel small.
Yeah.
Because I think it gives you a little bit of sense of, hey, you know, that big problem that I had right there, or my ego that might needed to be put into check, or the real issue that's out there, that's minor. We're going to figure it out, but it's also a way to clear your head. Love that.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Greg.
Thanks.
So tell us I'm going to do a joint thing here. Give us all the places you can find Bowery 315 or 315, and tell us exactly what it's about and what you're doing and what's coming next. So all the plugs, places we could find you, social media, your websites, et cetera.
Great. So best place to find me is at Bowery315.com. That is my website. It should be up today. I just redesigned it because to coincide with the launch of the book. The book is available on Amazon. It is called This Might Get Me Fired. And I am doing a bunch of different talks. I'm going to be in LA next week at Philosophy in Santa Monica. I don't know when this is coming out, but if it is coming out,
you would have already been in LA. So we went back into time. That's okay.
Well, just hop into your Michael J. Fox time machine and go over on May 24th to Santa Monica. And on May 31st, I'm going to be at SY Partners in New York City. That's going to be a panel discussion with one of my former colleagues who's currently head of product at Innovest, Sally Krawcheck, Debbie Whistle.
Oh, yeah. I know Sally very well. Worked with her over at Merrill and Merrill specifically.
Oh, great. Yeah. Awesome. And there's a lot of other dates, but those are the big ones that come to mind. And I'm about to start doing a syndicated blog, I believe, on Irish Tech News. They hooked me up with that. So excited to announce that. And I say this earnestly because I think when people often find it hard to approach the guests, email me. If anything that I have said resonates, if you are the type of person that needs to hire me, or if you're just someone who's like, I'm stuck in exactly the way that you just described, email Greg at Bowery, BOWERY 315.com, mention the podcast. I will email you back. I wrote this book not for the purpose of gratuitous self-promotion. I wrote it because I wanted to have an impact and to start a movement, and for every entrepreneur who works in a big company to have the most impact that they can.
And that is why Greg Larkin is on Thrive Loud today, thriving with everything that he does, even in his PR and messaging. So we love it, Greg. It certainly does a great job here.
Thanks for having me, Lou.
So Greg Larkin, last question before we sign off here. Your all-time favorite movie?
All right. So I have the highbrow and the lowbrow. The highbrow is Apocalypse Now.
Love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yeah. I think that opening sequence with "This Is the End" by the Doors is probably my favorite opening sequence of any movie ever. Mm-hmm. And I have a 10-year-old boy called Max and an 8-year-old daughter called Rose. And the other week, they're like, Daddy, can we watch a movie tonight? And we watched Anchorman. And I was laughing my ass off at Anchorman. And not because it was working on another level. I was laughing for the exact same reason that my small kids were laughing.
The Anchor News of San Diego street fight scene is still one of my favorite scenes of all movies. Classic. And when they get back, and the best line is when they're back in the office and Paul Rudd looks and goes, wow, that got violent really fast.
Amazing.
Really good stuff.
Amazing.
No, it's very, very good. Well, Greg Larkin, you're obviously of the same ilk, and we'll make sure that we tell Jenna to take us out for a drink, just for the heck of it, because it'll make it more fun that way.
I love it when Jenna takes me out for a drink.
When does that ever happen? I'm always buying her drinks. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I'm still trying to hack that.
Yeah. Well, great luck with the book. This is awesome. This might get me fired. All your success with Bowery 315. And again, man, thank you for coming on the show. This is spectacular stuff. You're a perfect fit here into the Thrive Lab community.
Thanks, Lou. It's been a pleasure.
And to all the Thrive Lab listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.